How do you say this place name? Does the second vowel you say sound more like the vowel in the word lot or the word trap? Well, it looks like this might be a political accent. Researchers looked at how American politicians pronounce this place name. Conservatives were more likely to use the trap vowel,
Iraq,
while liberals were more likely to use the lot vowel,
Iraq.
a pronunciation closer to how this word sounds in Arabic. But I suspected that speakers who aren't politicians might also pattern the same way, especially seeing how political identity has become a stronger part of Americans' identities in general lately. So, round one. I went around asking random people to do a geography quiz. I'd hand them a list of place names and asked them to say them in the order of how hot they think they get during the summer. I didn't care at all whether they were correct, I just cared about how they pronounced them. Then I asked for further info about them, like their political identity. Sure enough, the same pattern held. Liberals were more likely to say Iraq. Conservatives were more likely to say Iraq. But I wanted to know how much was this really about politics, or if it's a result of other social factors that pattern with politics. So what are these other possible influences? One might be attitude. From linguistic research, we know that different people or different social groups might speak the same language, but their speech might still differ in subtle ways, like their pronunciation. We also find that the more positive attitude you hold toward a certain person or social group, the more the way they speak might have an influence on the way you speak, where your speech might come to resemble theirs more and more. So, if you have a more positive attitude toward people from a certain place, you might be more likely to pronounce the name of that place like they do in their language. And it looks like relevant attitudes do pattern with US politics. Liberals are more likely to hold more positive attitudes towards Arabs and Arab Americans than those held by conservatives, which could explain why liberals are more likely to say
Iraq.
But something I didn't tell you about the geography quiz from before was that the same pattern held for other place names of less political charge. Liberals were more likely, in general, to pronounce place names in ways more similar to how people from those places pronounce them, like Iraq, Chile, or Quebec, versus Iraq, Chile, or Quebec. So this might not be about attitudes toward a particular group, place, or language. This led me to think that the broader factor of globalism might be causing this, which also appears to pattern with US politics, especially in recent politics, where liberals tend to hold a more globalist ideology, while conservatives tend to hold a more nationalist ideology. For example, say foreign people from different cultures enter the US. Someone with a more nationalist ideology might more strongly expect them to adjust to a way of life that fits in more and feels less foreign. And this same pattern might hold for foreign words entering the language. Say one language is in strong contact with speakers of another language. It might be inclined to borrow a word from that language, but some might have a stronger feeling that at least the pronunciation of that word should be adjusted to a pronunciation that fits in more and feels less foreign. So, to recap, we have this political pattern in the pronunciation of foreign words between pronunciations that more or less closely resemble how they're pronounced in their original languages, like Iraq, Iraq. But this could be a result of other social factors that also pattern with politics in parallel directions. Which leads us to round two. I had people read a random list of words out loud that included place names with variable pronunciations, like Iraq, Iraq, or Iran, Iran. Then I had them do a survey, getting responses like strongly agree, somewhat disagree, with different statements getting at factors like their political identity. My political views are usually conservative. Their attitudes regarding the Middle East. There are aspects of Middle Eastern culture that make me uncomfortable. Or their alignment with a globalist or a nationalist kind of persona. I consider myself sensitive to other cultures. Then I looked at how strongly these social factors patterned with whether people used the A pronunciation, Iraq or Iran, versus the A pronunciation, Iraq or Iran. So we might imagine that the more positive attitude someone has regarding the Middle East, the more likely they are to use the A pronunciations, and vice versa. And sure enough, that seems to be the case. People with more positive attitudes regarding the Middle East were more likely to use the pronunciations more similar to how people from those places pronounce them. But actually, how global they identified was a much stronger predictor, with people identifying as more global more likely to use the A pronunciations, while political identity itself was actually the weakest predictor. So it looks like, while this pronunciation difference patterns with political identity, it may not be a purely political accent in and of itself. Instead, it seems like this political speech pattern falls out from and reflects the attitudes and ideologies that pattern with US politics.